and it will be recorded. So again, mute your microphones if you haven't. And I'd like to introduce Roger. Roger is a friend and a leader in the Oregon Carvers Guild as vice president, and he's president of the Northwest Woodturners, and he's past president of the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers, and he's a carver and a woodturner and a furniture maker and a webmaster and a video expert and a technology expert. There's almost nothing that Roger can't do. And I see Ed Ferguson smiling, so he agrees, right? So Roger is a friend. He volunteered a couple months ago to put this program together on an overview of power carving tools. So Roger, I will let you now take control of the mic and take it from here. I will spotlight you, but let me comment about questions. There are about 30 people involved tonight. We can try to ask questions verbally, but you can also, probably the better way is to put them in the chat. And Roger will monitor them, I will monitor them, and in between you shouting and us reading, we'll be able to get the questions going. So Roger, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Larry. So the video that I put together is really divided into a number of sections. And as far as questions go, I wonder if it may make sense to pause at the end of each section, which talks about a specific type of tool, and see if there's questions there. We can put them in the chat, and we'll sort of make a on-the-fly decision whether we do it that way or wait till the end. And at the end, we have a panel of myself and 3 other members here that will take questions, because it's better to have more than one viewpoint on all this stuff. So I'm going to share my screen here. And just make sure everyone is seeing it. I think you have it spotlighted.
I do, and I can see it.
Okay, so here we go. So these are the different sections that we're going to talk about. Or the Dremel line, there are 10, 15 different versions of a Dremel tool. Dremel's also almost become like a Kleenex is as a generic term for these rotary tools. There's the plug-in ones like this. They are very powerful. Obviously, the battery's not going to run out. They got a lot of power and a variable speed capability through the switch here.
Roger, can you pause for a minute?
Battery operated ones. The early ones weren't very impressive. The battery didn't last long, but these have plenty of power. This is a 10.8 volt lithium battery one, and the battery lasts a long, long time. This is actually my favorite tool. There's a smaller version, battery ones. This is a 7 volt one. This has 2 speeds, high and low. And but they all take the same accessories, the 1/8 inch burrs. This is a specialty Dremel tool. It's mostly for engraving. It's got a fixed point here. You can't really change it, but it's a plug-in version. And as I say, it's built for engraving. You can hold it almost like a pencil and do your work. One of the advantages of a Dremel is that it's got a ton of accessories. This one here is a right angle. It goes right on the tip there and basically gives you a right angle holder for your burrs. It's also got a accessory that adds length and is a flex shaft. It goes into the end of the Dremel tool right there. You take that off, cap off, that goes in, and you've got basically an extension
that will accept any of the common Dremel bits and burrs. The other nice accessory is a holder for doing very fine work. Your tool goes in here, latches in, and then you've got the ability to finally hold it for engraving a pattern. If you got a straight pattern, this is an edge guide here, or you can trace a pattern that you've drawn on your wood, and basically make it a easy to control carving engraving tool. Dremel also makes a Fortum-like flex shaft product. So 1/5 horsepower, runs about $200, and they run around 2,300 RPM. The handset ones, these run between 25 and 35,000 RPM. They come standard holding 1/8 inch with a 1/8 inch collet, but there's other collets you can use to go down in size to the 3/32 inch accessories. So I think if you only had one to pick, I would go for this one right here. It's the 10.8 volt lithium ion battery. The battery slips on, it charges very quickly, and it's got a lot of power, and the battery runs for a really long time. So to me, this is probably the best value Dremel tool that that I would get as my first Dremel, unless you had a specialty need like an engraver or something like that. But this has been pretty good for me. The Fortum is the most powerful power carver on the market right now. This version has a 1/5 horsepower motor here, and it connects to the handpiece through a rather stiff cable. And the nice thing about the Fortums are they have a lot of different handsets. This is the big one for power carving. It's got a 1/4 inch burr in here for hogging out a lot of wood really quickly. You can change headsets, just disconnect them, plug them back in, and you've got a small piece for doing finer work. This is one you can almost hold like a pencil, good for engraving fine detail with smaller burrs. Again, pull it out. One of the features of this handset is a reciprocating carver. Plug it in, turn it off, get a piece of wood here, and with a little pressure, and it's got a half a dozen or so different carving bits that you can put in here. But that's the reciprocating carver. They have an angle grinder, which is quite nice. It's good for sanding. It takes standard these 2-inch sanding discs. Just go in with a Velcro, and you can use your as a hand sander. I use this a lot on the lathe. The angle grinder is also nice because you can take the angle piece off and put another sanding attachment on for a small belt. These burrs are quite aggressive. This is a fairly heavy ball burr, and these run in the $15 to $20 range for these big ones. Again, they come in all different grits, sizes, shapes, whatever you want. The next power carver is called a micro motor. The motor for is actually right in the handset, and the advantage of that is it makes it very easy to manipulate and carve. The connection to the power supply is just a very lightweight extension cord here, and seldom gets in the way of what you're carving. The collets, the burrs at this take are a size up from the Presto. The Presto is 1/16 inch.
I'm gonna stop for a minute. Are people having a hard time with the audio? Does it sound like there's an echo there?
No,
It's okay on my end.
coming okay here. Yep.
Good.
Collets, well, this is 3/32 and 1/8 inch collets. 1/8 inch is pretty much a standard, what you'll see in a lot of these from the Dremel on up. It's got a speed control that you can do from here, or you can use a foot control, which a lot of people like, and control by foot. It goes in both directions, and it runs in the 30,000 to 40,000 RPM range. It's got a lot of power. It's good for engraving, for an inlay. Here are a couple of examples of inlay carving. The design was carved out with a drill bit type burr, and the inlay was filled in with a crushed stone. Another example is here. See if I can get rid of the reflection there. But again, it starts out with a drill bit type burr to carve out the pattern, and then it's filled with crushed stone and CA glue, and then sanded. The rim is also filled with crushed stone. And a lot of that work, again, was done with this micromotor. Changing bits is, again, very simple. You just rotate one way, it releases the collet. You pull the bit out, push the bit burr back in, turn it the other way, and it's locked in there. For the different size burrs, you just add a different type collet to grip the burr. There are just a ton of different burrs that you can buy for these machines. This will handy holder for putting the different size burrs in here. And I'll show you examples of different burrs in a second here. But so most of the burrs go for between $2.50 up to $10 to $15, depending on the size and the design of the burr. Another one I use a lot is also a micromotor, but it's portable. It has a battery in the base unit here, and then connects to a very lightweight handpiece. Accepts all the same burrs as the last micromotor one, but it runs a little bit slower at 30,000 RPM instead of 40 to 50,000 RPM. Again, the bits are easy to change. You rotate one way, slips out, locks in, rotate the other way. This is a portable unit. It also bidirectional, goes in both directions, and variable speed, very easy and lightweight. The whole unit can move around, attach to your belt, go in your pocket, or I've got a little attachment here where I can, with magnets, I can connect it to my lathe, and I can do my carving right next to headset. The portable version, this runs about $250. The other micromotor is also in the $250 to $300 range. The next power carver we're going to talk about is the high-speed NSK Presto. It runs in the 360,000 RPM range. It's air-driven. It's connected to my air compressor here. It's got a built-in regulator to set at 35 PSI, which is what the handset runs at. The handpiece is very lightweight. The bits are easy to change. The burrs are easy to change. You just rotate the handset. They pop right out. To put a new burr in, it comes with this little accessory that you basically just pop it in there, turn on, and you're ready to go. The burrs run about $2.50 each. The Presto itself, the whole complete unit, runs about $500. And it's good for doing very fine piercing work. This is an example of what I'm talking about. This little bowl here is turned to between about 2 millimeters thick. And the cutouts and the piercings are all done with the Presto unit. Very time consuming, but the results are impressive. This is another example of another piece that again is turned very, very thin, and the piercing is done with that handset. But also on this, I don't know if you can see it here, but we also I also used it for stippling, where you just create a pattern here that doesn't pierce the wood, but it just makes a stippling pattern. Fiber type brushes that are good for getting rid of fuzzies after you do carving, and just cleans up carvings. There's different grits by the color. This is the drill bit that I talked about for doing inlay carving, and even though it's a drill bit, it's really not for drilling. It's real easy to control. It doesn't jump on you like some of the more aggressive bits. There's different brushes. This is a brass brush, and there's steel brushes, real soft nylon brushes. And then you've got your more specialized burrs. This is a fairly aggressive one for doing straight lines. There's round ones, cylinder ones that are good for carving out a lot of wood at a time. There's pointed ones for getting into to corners. There's just cotton pads for fine brushing, maybe for plastics. Different size cylinder ones. This has a round tip, whereas the other one, where's a clean spot. The other one had a flat tip. There's different balls, size balls that you can get. So your options for burrs are very extensive. They range from about $2.50 for simple ones to under $10 for most of the 3/32 inch and burrs like this, and to some, probably the most expensive ones range in the $12 to $15 range. And again, a lot of options. All these can come in different grits. Here are some of the pieces I've carved with the hand pieces that we just looked at. This right here, the yellow curved lines were drawn off an indexing feature of a lathe, and then with the edge of a bottle, drew the curve. And then with this device, with this bit right here, this made the carved out the along the lines there. And then the yellow is actually a wax that you fill in. And since the piece was already had a finish on it, you could let the wax dry in the groove and then just wipe off and scrape off the rest of it to give you a nice clean look. Piece like this, the panels are carved out with a huge Fordham bit, and that took off most of the wood. And then with the fine pointed ones, I could get into the corners and make square corners. The black diagram drawings in here were burned in with pyrography with a branding bit for the hand pieces. But most of this was hand carved or power carved with different bits, and then painted gold. This is another piece where the panels were carved out pretty deep, and then painted with different types of paints, and then a little drawing of something that was painted on. And again, it's carved, it's hollowed out, but the designs here were all carved in. And then there's a piece like this that again was turned. The black was carved out and then stippled with a power carver with a sort of a random stippling design. And then these were cut out with the cutter, again micromotor tool, and then painted. Next, we have a rather unique flex shaft product called the Genevier. It's really was designed for finish sanding and sanding in tight areas, bottom of bowls, and so on. What makes it unique is it's got these rubber bladders that you put your sanding sleeve on, like this. And once on, you use this little hand pump to pump up the bladder and to either soft or firm, whatever you want. But the bladder will let you, if you keep it soft, will go around corners quite easily and sort of adapt to the item that you're sanding. Or you can pump it up quite hard, and the slow speed gives you some flexibility in making sure that you don't take off too much material. It's not variable speed, it's just single speed. And let's see here, running about 3,600 RPM, as I say. It's got two main type of accessories: the round with no bottom, or it's got the rounded ones that again are good for getting in the bottom of hollow forms or other type of items you're working with. There's a lot of different grit sleeves from this is 220, 150, 320, and it goes down to 80 grit sleeves. So it's quite handy. As I say, I use it mostly for finish sanding on inside of hollow forms. And this, you can put a buffing wheel on this side if you want to use it for buffing, and the slow speed again. For this application is an advantage of this type of device. And I think they run around $350. These are accessories that go on an angle grinder. This is a battery operated one from Rigid. Their angle grinders are fairly inexpensive, from $35, $40 for the plug-in ones to the battery operated ones, which are not much more. But if you buy into a brand of battery operated tools, the standalone tool itself is around $60 or $70. So the tool part of these are not very expensive. A lot of people will get an angle grinder to cut metal. This is a 40 grit metal 16th inch disc, and use that. You can go right through metal pipes, copper pipes, whatever, pretty quickly. For us, what we're going to talk about is carving. And this category of accessories are for hogging out and doing not fine sanding, but smoothing out rough sanded work. This is a fairly low grit one, and they go into medium and fine grit. You can see these are gummed up quite a bit. The way you clean them is actually with a blowtorch. You can take your blowtorch in there and clean these out pretty well, if that's what you want to do. If you're working on a log that has a lot of pitch, it will gum up pretty quickly. The next category are mini chainsaws. So these two are examples of attachments that will go on and turn your angle grinder into a mini chainsaw. And there's a lot of uses for that, but they are very aggressive. And you want to make sure you have all your safety gear on for eye protection, hand protection, and whatever. When using an angle grinder, you always want to use two hands, especially when you're going into the wood. It can really jump on you. So be very, very careful in using this type of tool. The last attachment I wanted to bring up is a rather unique accessory from Arbortech, and we'll be talking about Arbortech tools in the next section. But this is actually a planer. In this case, there's 3 blades along here, and you can flatten out a log or a board, just like a handheld planer. But they work, again, these are very aggressive, and when you touch them to the wood, they will jump on you, so you need to hang on to it pretty tightly. But once you get going, they work great at smoothing out raw wood. So continuing with accessories for an angle grinder, we have a set of really cool attachments, again, from Arbortech. They're designed so that they will screw right on to the shaft of the angle grinder. And I have four different kinds here. The first one is for sanding. It's good for contours. You can see this is a rubber backing, and then there's different grit 2-inch sanding discs that will stick right on there. You can also get an adapter so that you can use instead of PSA type sanding disc, just Velcro ones that stick right on and easy to change. Like we saw with the planer attachment, this is a 2-inch one that goes on the angle grinder again for getting into smaller spots. And this has two cutters. And again, it just screws right onto the angle grinder. Another recent option that they just came out with is this ball gouge. And you can see it's a little bit of it at an angle. So it's good for basically carving out round holes in your wood. And then this is called a turbo shaft, which is I think that's about 3/4 inch. And again, that's for making holes going straight in, like for I don't know, maybe eyeballs in something that you're carving. So you can either use this, which would be more of a flat bottom, whereas this the ball gouge would give you a totally round hole, both around the sides and round bottom. ArborTech also makes a power carver, which if you don't want to use a big angle grinder, this is their power carver. And right now the accessory I have on here is for putting round discs in here. You have a sanding disc that you screw in there. We have these 2-blade cutters for cutting. A lower cost this steel accessories for cutting. And this whole part here comes off, and you can use by taking that off, you can use this with the tool that we just looked at for the angle grinder. So for example, this one here, you could use it as I said, go straight in, make a hole, or more likely you can use it like a router. And in this case, it'll be a 3/4 inch groove that you're making, and just use the tool, and there should be a handle here. Again, you can put this in here at the end, on here, and use it for planing out, smoothing out your wood. So the power carver is about $250. There's a chisel option, which I don't have, that replaces this and makes it a powered chisel. And as you saw on the Fordham handset for power carving, it comes with a set of, I don't know, maybe half a dozen different shaped chisels. And by putting a little pressure on there, you can just remove a lot of wood very quickly. One thing I don't care for this, number one, it's not variable speed, but neither is your angle grinder. It does run at 12,000 RPM, where your angle grinder is about 6,000 or so RPM. But in the case of the sanding disc here, you see all these are pretty clean because I've never used them. You have to use a little screw nut to attach them and to go from grit to grit. It takes a lot of time, so that's why I like the option with a device like this, where you can easily go from grit to grit with a PSA disc, or you can get the accessory to make it, with the Velcro type backing.
Okay, there we go. I think we can stop share here. So time for our panel to come online and for you guys to shoot some questions our way. Anybody out there?
You want me to introduce the panel, or do you want to do that?
Go ahead.
So we have 3 volunteers that got recruited that were known to have some power carving experience. I'm going to pick on Jim Hall first. Jim Hall is a local expert in a variety of dimensions and turning, and he doesn't think about carving, but I do, but he's got a lot of power carving experience. Jim, I'm going to have you go first, and then Al, I'll have you go second. Al Plash is a new friend, lives in Ventura, California, and we belong to the same club in the Central California area. And last but not least is Tom Nicholson, also in California and a member of the Central Coast Woodcarvers. So Jim, we asked the panelists to share kind of their observations, their experiences, their wisdom of how to get started in power carving things. There's not enough time in the world to go through everything, but if they could touch on the highlights, they can use that as a way to introduce themselves a bit, and then maybe that would encourage you to think about questions you could ask to them or to Roger. So Jim, I'm going to spotlight you and have you go first. Okay, you have full screen.
And you're muted.
Okay. One thing that I do that I really like doing is doing stippling. Now that's just a damn old bowl. It would not be much of a bowl at all, but for the stippling. That add the stippling that, like Roger was talking about, really, really adds to a piece of wood. It's just nice and it works and it improves the look of the final bowl without question. I add the stippling in other ways as well. I'll take and essentially a hollow form, and I'll bring the stripe down the side and curve it. Also has a different top on it, and it has holes in it, but there's stippling in that and with some color. And as a result, these are very handy. And all of this is done with an NSK tool. This one, the other one that you were looking at is done with an NSK, but it's a Proctor. It's that one is 360,000 RPM. This one is a 40,000 RPM. Those are 2 very, very good tools. Now, the way I picked my tools was due to age. I bought the NSK first. There was not much on the market at that time, and that was an expensive tool at that time, but there wasn't anything else. And I have used it and used it and used it at least 20 and quite probably close to 30 years. It is a very, very good tool. Another use of things that you can do. This is a little carving. In addition, I like to kind of get weird at times, and that's what this one is. It's a piece of burl and a piece of, I don't know really know what this is up here, but it's it's a seahorse inside it. Now that's kind of fun to do. I did this, I took a piece of burl, cut it, slabbed it on the bottom, and fit the top to the burl. And I put the seahorse in And then I put the net on top. And I've been asked a good many times by quite a few people, how in the world do you do that? Well, it's quite easy. You take and cut the wood. And this is all done with NSK and high speed and otherwise, and a lathe. I also had a friend, unfortunately he's passed, and I took and did some of the work he did. Not near as well as he did, but this is a piece of, what is it? I can never remember. It doesn't matter, it's a piece of wood. And some paintings of cutting in there, some coloring and all sorts of good things. Those are kind of fun. And this is the last one, and probably bored as hell with me right now anyway. And this is Mount Hood and Portland. Multnomah Falls, and so on and so forth. It's all done with, excuse me, a lathe, NSK stuff, and a little paint. I do a lot of crazy stuff, and it's all kind of fun. I've used it for many, many reasons, saving what little brains I have and to get it done. But before I get off the podium, I have a question for Larry. Larry, where can you get these things? Ones like that and ones like this. I use a great deal of them for sanding. And I just can't find this. I bought them years ago, but nobody sells them anymore. So I want some. I have been probably 10 different places, and no, we don't carry those anymore. Well, dang it anyway.
So Jim, I'm a beginner. I can't answer that question, so maybe somebody else will have an answer for you. But I do have a question for you,
Sure.
and that is, you have a Fordham, I know.
Yes, I have.
So how have you used it? How do you use it? What are the pros and cons from your perspective, or the kind of things that you like to do?
The Fordham is a good tool for heavy duty work. I use mine. I do not use it for the foot pedal. That foot pedal to me is a pain in the backside. It doesn't work right, in my opinion. It is I have some of these that I use with the Fordham. They're big ones. And they work very nicely on the Fordham, and no problem at all. I also have some very large bits that that the NSK will not handle. It has a lot more strength, but I also use a air-driven equipment that has about a 1/4 inch bit diameter. So I use those occasionally when I really want to go after something. I usually pretty much stay in the smaller stuff. I used to do a lot of hogging. I don't do that anymore. I don't know why, I just don't. But it works quite well. I have 4 kinds of tools. I have air-driven, I have Fordham, and I have 2 kinds of NSKs, as well as my lathe, and also I guess a 5th one, my Rose engine.
Okay, Jim, I'm going to pause you, and then Al, I'm going to have you unmute yourself, and I'm going to remove the spotlight from Jim. And I got to go find you so I can spotlight you.
Here I am.
There you are, Al. Okay, here we go. So you are now spotlighted. We see your beautiful beard and your smiling face.
Messy hair. I started out carving with hand tools. I think a lot of us have. And by the way, Jim, beautiful work. Thanks for sharing that. And also Roger giving us an introduction to these power tools. Power tools are, they're just really help do things that a lot of times you can't do with tools. I found like in bark carving, using the micromotors and these fine little tools here, the bark doesn't chip away. So having a carving tool, a motorized carving tool really helps. I got interested in power carving when I met a guy, Jeff Wardwell, who was a bird carver, a wildlife carver, and started taking some classes from him. I've carved a red-tailed hawk and several species of fish, and my favorite is I know what it is, an elk, but those are all packed away because we just did our floors. But I started out with a Dremel on a cable. That was my first experience with trying to do power carving. Power carving is very dusty, so I really like to wear a mask, and my favorite mask is this Breathe Healthy mask, about $20. Had used these for years, and they're good to down one micron. The issue is when you have a beard is the seal around here, but still it's the best option I've found because I can use this over and over again. I can wash it. I always put something over my eyes because I don't know about others, but your glasses do protect you somewhat, but things seem to have an opportunity to go around and get in your eye. I also, when I'm using a power, particularly when you're using the bigger Fordham style, I don't have a Fordham, I have a Master Carver that's a half horsepower and goes back and forth. And I agree with Jim. I tried using the foot pedal on that, and I just would twist the cable up on it. So I got I think Roger had one that was on his Fordham, just mounted on the table. I actually mount my big carver on a pole, and then I have my controller on the table, so I can control the speed on the table. But I do have a Deadman foot pedal, so while I'm pressing it, it goes. If something goes bad, I can take my foot off the real quick and it stops. Because when you're using something like this is a very aggressive bit. So I always wear a glove when I'm doing the big stuff. I don't wear a glove when I'm using the micro motors. My first micro motor was one that had been dropped, but I got a San Diego carving club, carving show, and it's a Bressler, but it only has one size for the bits, and that's a 3/32. So I do love the unit that I got from Master Carver, the micro carver that I didn't get out. But I do a lot of work. But I don't know how anybody can get along without having one of these little micro motors. I love it. I use it to repair a lot of little things, like a screw head that goes bad, things like that. I did have a question for Roger. How much have you used the reciprocating carver? They're kind of noisy and they vibrate a lot, is what I found.
What I found with I don't use it a lot. What I found was the bits are really hard to sharpen.
Yes.
And to get a good edge on them is a challenge. So I think if I'm doing a low relief carving, I'll use that to just hog out a bunch of stuff initially and then move to a better tool. But yeah, it's
Thank
not the
you.
most used tool.
The other question I had was what brand, I haven't seen a micromotor battery operated a unit like you have there. Do you know what brand that is?
I got it from Treeline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just check on Treeline. I forget the name of it now, but it's actually on sale a couple months ago. But it's a real handy thing. I found myself using it much more than I thought I would because as I said, I with magnets I put it on the headstock of my lathe and I can do work, within 12 inches of my piece still mounted on the lathe. So I like that.
Very cool. Just a comment for you and Jim too. It's one thing to be a turner, but to be able, it's easier for a carver to learn to turn than it is for a turner to learn to carve. I understand. So when you make a combination, it really makes some beautiful work. Beautiful work. I have one last question, I think, for you, Roger, is on that gold painted vase that you had.
Yeah.
Were you using a bit kind of like that? How did you indent that and keep it kind of
Actually,
flat?
I used almost the same one you have. It was the red bit that was in it, and I think it was a medium coarse rather than a real coarse one. We had a question in chat whether the color coding on bits was something that was standard. It's standard within a vendor, but not standard across the industry. So yellow might mean one thing in one brand and another in another brand. Which is
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah. So Tom, I'm going to have you unmute yourself. Al, I'll pause you and take you off
Okay.
the billboard, and I'll go find Tom. There we go. Okay.
So I carve totally with power these days. I started out as a hand carver, carving carousel animals at the Albany Carousel. But after I moved down here to California, I eventually moved over to, I joined the Central Coast Wood Carvers, and we have a lot of variety of carvers there, and I started learning to carve smaller things. And I decided I did not like to paint, so that left me with hardwoods and natural finishes. So I carve very hardwoods generally. I've got some examples here. And I carve only wildlife. Here's this is extremely hard, extremely hard.
What is that wood again, Tom?
It's mango, came from South America. And this is a piece of madrone burl. This is a kestrel that I carved. This is all done with power.
Madrone is an absolutely gorgeous wood.
Yes, madrone it is, and it's very hard. It's very hard. I carve a lot of myrtle. I carve these sea otters, and actually I carve them out of all kinds of wood. But I do a lot of myrtle carving. And one of my favorite woods is California buckeye burl, which is actually not a particularly hard wood, but it has hard spots in it. And this is my latest project. It's not, I need to get a base for it, but this is all done with power. And I have a Foredom, and at the time that I purchased my Foredom, I knew that I was going to be carving hardwood. So I got their heavy duty version, which is 1/3 horsepower, and it's got a square shaft. And I've had that for over 10 years and I've yet to break a shaft. The disadvantage of that, having that model, is that all of those little hand pieces in it and accessories that Roger talked about don't go on that handle. So I have to run I'd have to run a different cable, to the round cable, in order to use those. So that's a disadvantage. I also have an Optima 2. Actually it's an Optima 2 Plus. It goes 45,000 RPM microcarver. And those are the two primary things I carved with. I also picked up a Proxxon power chisel, reciprocal power chisel. And for most of the woods that I'm dealing with, it just does not do the job. I did do some carving. I don't know if you can see in the background here, there's an otter and a trout, and that's out of Western juniper. And some of that is soft enough that power chisel would take some of the wood off, but for the most part, I don't use it very much. It's not real useful. I wanted to highlight, well, let me give you so this is these are the bulk of my bits. And one thing that I wanted to point out, I've got a number of bits here that are carbide, and they're a little bit more expensive, but they cut really nice, and they typically leave depending on the pattern, they'll leave a smooth surface when I carve.
They're worth the price.
Beg pardon?
They're worth the price.
They're, I'd say $15 to $30.
I say they are worth the price.
Oh, yes, they are worth the price. Yes, yes. I wanted to point out a few other things that I have that Roger didn't talk about. So I've got the heavy duty for the Fordham. I've got the typical heavy duty burrs that really take off the wood. But then originally that's what I used that for, to just take off big chunks of wood. For example, on this fish, when I cut the pattern out for this fish, I have to, since everything is one piece here. There's no inserted fins. Everything is one piece. So this is solid wood all the way down through here, all the way out to here. And so I have to take that wood off. And I use these big burrs to do that too. And it'll take a while, especially when you get a really hardwood. It'll really take a while to do that. And so originally I would use my Fordham to do that. And then when I got into some of the other shaping, I'd start using the microcarver. But then I found these sanding drums, and these come in different sizes. This one is a 2-inch by 1.5. I've got this one is a 1-inch by 1 inch, and then it's got a 2-inch sleeve on it. And basically what you do is, let me see, I've got an example. I've got a couple different brands here. Oh, here we go. So basically you unscrew these, and they have a rubber drum inside. And so when you put the sleeve on and you tighten this up, it presses against that drum and expands the drum and holds them in place. And you can get these in really heavy grits of 50, all the way up to I believe I think 150 is what I've got. And so I've gotten to the point where I use these for, I'd say 80% of my carving, getting the shaping. These work really well. They take off wood and they leave a relatively smooth surface. They'll leave some striations that you have to come back with later and hit. And then I'll use a sanding disc. Well, it's a I don't know what you call it, but it's like a drum. Now, and these you can put different kinds of sandpaper on, and you get this paperback sandpaper either from this one's Klingspor out of Germany, and this one's made in Switzerland. And you can get these in different grits, and then they go on these essentially it's a drum, but it's soft rubber, and so it gives. And so what you do is you slip take your sandpaper and you slip it over it and into the slots. And then it's got a piece that goes in the end. And then you just twist that and it just tightens it down. And those, I use those a lot. And I've got those from, these are, I guess, 3/4 of an inch. And then I've got a whole bunch of smaller ones for the microcarver. These get down to 1/4 inch. You can get into little places. These are great. I'd highly recommend those. The other thing with sandpaper is you get mandrels and that have a slot in them. And these are great for the microcarvers. They've got a slot in them. You slip the sandpaper in there and originally you had to put a rubber band around it to hold it, but now you can get this adhesive sandpaper and just wrap it around. Gets into different places, small little holes. Works great. What else did I mention? Oh, also those balls and bladders with the Guinevere. I've gotten those in a smaller size, and those have a shaft on them that will go in the Fordham also. So I've used those in the Fordham. The one thing you have to be careful with is you have to watch the speed on the Fordham. One other comment. I use the foot pedal on the Fordham, and I've never had an issue with that. It's always worked great. So I don't know, that's just been my experience. From a safety standpoint, we wanted to mention the gloves. I always wear a leather glove on my left hand. I'm right-handed. I hold my piece in my left hand. And I do that all the time I'm carving, whether I'm on the microcarver or the Fordham. Definitely the Fordham, but even on the microcarver, because the microcarver, you can get some pretty aggressive bits. And the thing you have to watch is that depending on the location and the grain and such, you'll end up with, you'll be holding the piece and this thing will fly around and catch the wood and just really get out of control. And so this can do some damage. I've gone through many sets of gloves because it chews up the ends of the fingers of the gloves, but it doesn't chew up my fingers. So that's something to, and the other thing is dust control. I've just got a little corner of my garage is where I work. And I've got a very simplistic dust control system. I know, I imagine with you guys with the lathes and such have a more complicated dust control. I just use a shop vac. I've got my table in front of me. It's got a hole in the middle where I do my work with a constrictor down with a hose going to a vortex, which is a tank, which collects the dust. Though I find that a lot of the stuff is such fine dust that it bypasses the vortex and ends up clogging up the shop vac. And then I've got a small portable unit that has a filter in it, and that sucks the dust away from me and towards the hole, and that all works pretty well. I also have I don't wear goggles because I always have problems with goggles fogging up and such. So what I do is when I'm carving, I've got a big magnifying glass with lights on either side of it. So it's about this big. And so I put my carving on the other side of that. And so anything that's coming up will hit that. And if I've got a piece that's too big to do that, then I'll use a face shield to protect my face from that. I always wear a dust mask also when part of I mean, a lot of these woods can be toxic, so gotta be careful about that.
Do you wear an apron, Tom?
I wear a leather apron, yeah. Yeah, always wear a leather apron. Though I found that that was more useful when I was hand carving than it has been with the power carving. My tools never get that close to me to be a problem. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention on these sleeves that you get to go over these rubber mandrels. Eventually they wear, and so they'll start to unlaminate here, not unravel. And so when that happens, you got to be careful, because you get going too fast, all of a sudden they'll explode and come totally undone and fly around the room. So just beware of that.
That's a good point. Let me interrupt for a second on those sleeves that Tom was showing you there. If you go on Amazon, you can find the Dremel sleeves, for 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch bits, like, 500 sleeves for $4 or something like that. Don't buy them.
Yeah.
They're junk.
In one of my weaker moments, I did buy it. I put one on. As soon as I hit the wood, that thing just came apart, hit me
Explodes.
in the glasses, and scary as hell. So it's not worth saving a few pennies for those. So get good ones. But even though Amazon is very enticing, let me tell you.
Tom, you're an example of needing to use power tools because of tennis elbow, golf elbow.
Yeah,
So there's a kind of the reason, kind of the background of this thing, why I kind of pointed that out with you, is that sometimes you either give up carving or you go to power. When I
right.
first joined Western Wood Carvers, there was a guy that he was carving eagles and canes because his joints gave out and he wasn't that old. And so that was the way that he kept going. He was making some money, but that's one of the reasons that people do this kind of thing.
Yeah, when I was carving the carousel animals there at the carousel, I started having problems with my elbow and didn't realize it until I finished the animal, which was 5 years and 1,000 hours later, and it wasn't carving that way anymore. All of a sudden, the pain went away, and it didn't come back until I took a bark carving class and was back using my chisels, and so that was what it was. It was the way I was using the chisels. But I wanted to carve hardwood anyway, and because I did, like I say, I do not like to paint. I did one saw wet owl and painted, and it took a long time to do that, and I just haven't gotten into painting, and I really like to do I really like the wood. It's all about the wood, and so I knew I needed to do power in order to carve things like myrtle and madrone and things like that. So it's kind of a combination of moving over and curing my elbow at the same time.
Yeah, I've got all four of you guys spotlighted as a panel. Maybe I can just ask you to think about your comments about work holding. How do you hold it in your hand? Do you hold it in vices? Do you make special jigs and rigs to? Obviously, it depends. But could you comment on your own experience about what you do for the various kinds of projects you have?
The projects that I'm dealing with, for example, here's a bear that I've carved out of California buckeye, and I carve a lot of these. I mean, this is something that I hold it in my hand and use the microcarver on it. Of course, there's I've got paint in my hands now, so it's this getting old, and your hobbies will kill you, it seems like. But I've tried using I've got a Veratus vise, and I've tried using that, but it just seems like, I mean, you're constantly moving to get the two sides the same, and it wasn't it wasn't flexible enough. It just, it never did work for me. So I do it by hand.
So do I. I have a lot of tools and so on, but that's the reason I use the power is I hold it right here,
Yeah.
right in front of me, and I have a shield that goes around me, and the air comes up over the top.
Ooh, good one.
And I got it right here. I got a good view of it. I got cameras and lights and everything. So it works just super. And it's by far the easiest. That's the way I work.
Yeah, for me, for the pieces that I start on the lathe, there's an attachment where you can take the chuck on the lathe that is holding your piece and put it into a vise on your workbench. So you can keep the piece in the chuck, screw it onto this attachment, attach it to your workbench either with a vise or whatever. And then you have 360-degree access to the whole thing. Doesn't work for everything, but for that, it's a really handy device. But for the small stuff, like Jim says, especially the piercing, that's all done by hand because the pieces are so fragile and lightweight. That makes the most sense.
I've always used a glove also. My pieces are smaller, so that's what my experience. And the Veritas holder I've used when I'm hand carving with hand tools. But yeah, it seems like holding it in your hand is the way to go with power.
Yeah, I've used the Veritas vise when I was using chisels and pounding on it and such. It worked well for that.
Yeah, it's a good vise for that.
Yeah, but for the power, I found that I'm just moving too much around the piece, that it just didn't work.
I think one safety thing that I think a lot of people have mentioned is the most critical time with a power carver is when the bit hits the wood. Once that's where it's going to jump on you. Once you get in there, then you can control it pretty easily. But sometimes it'll scare the hell out of you when you got that thing wrapped up and touch the wood, and all of a sudden bad things happen. So that's where you got to be really, really careful.
I have a comment from a guy in English. He is very well known. He works with one of the tools that you do, Roger, but he uses just one hand, and he uses the wood in his left hand. I made a comment one time. He's an ex-cop. And he said, well, I know what I'm doing. And I said, doesn't look like it to me. That thing can get away from you, and you're going to lose a part of your body that you might want to keep.
Yeah.
Al, you made a comment about you learned about keeping a finger or a thumb when using the micromotor in order to control the device. You don't just kind of hold it out and away from you. That control becomes really important.
Right. That's actually a hard thing for me to do, is to ground my finger on the workpiece. I don't have any wood here, but that, and then still hold the tool. You want to have, and I'm sure everybody does that naturally, but it was a hard thing for me to try to learn, and we have a really good power carver who is a dentist, does really excellent work, and he'll watch me and he'll catch me just freehanding up in the air. That doesn't work so good. You don't have much control.
Don't have any.
Yeah.
When I hold my microcarver, I do not hold it like a pencil. I
Oh,
hold it like this.
That's right.
Hold it like this.
really? Okay, that's good to
Yes.
know.
Yes, you have a whole lot more control over it
Thank you.
that way.
I have a friend here that is a very, very good carver. And he saw a guy that is was an excellent carver. And he would put the piece of wood on the floor, put his foot on the piece of wood, and then take some kind of a tool that would just grind the hell out of the wood. And I said to Bob, I said, I like my feet too well.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
That's what shoes
I
are
saw-
for, Jim.
Yeah, I saw a carver in Fiji who was barefoot, sitting there, holding the wood with his feet, and he was using, I think it's called an adze. It's a flat piece, and chopping away at it. And it was like, whoa.
No way,
I had-
no way, no way.
One other thing I wanted to mention, and that is when I'm using the microcarver and very hard wood, you have to be careful. Some of the burrs will actually burn the wood. And so that's one thing you have to be aware of. And so that typically when I'm carving, I'm at full speed, you tend to you have more control, it seems like, at full speed. But, and you can get the detail better. But with some of the burrs, if you're at full speed, you're going to be burning the wood. Like myrtle is that way. It's really hard, and it'll burn. So you need to go to a slower speed or a bit that's not as smooth. Some of these bits are actually pretty smooth. They've got very small little teeth in them, and so they'll make a nice smooth surface, but they will burn if you get them going too fast.
That's true. I have found that out. You bet. I'll show you a piece that I've used.
Well, Jim is getting that. For us mere mortals that are just getting started and have a Dremel, probably, life is a lot easier, it sounds like, if you have these smaller things to hold in your hands. But how do you actually control a Dremel safely, or do you? Are there any techniques that are worth thinking about?
You know, I tried a Dremel at first, but it was so big that my hand was so far away from where the bit was, it seemed like, and I didn't like the feel of it, so I gave that up right away.
I think that's a key point. It's the hand piece that really makes you productive or not productive.
Yes.
And the micromotors, are small, and they don't have that heavy cable that the Fordham has that you have to wrestle with sometimes. But it's
Sometimes you have to do that.
you got to be comfortable with the hand piece. That's why if you can. Nice thing about a wood show is if they have them there, you can try them out and see which one is most comfortable for you.
Jim, what do you got?
What you got, Jim?
I got this. This is burl, a piece of maple. And I had exactly the problem that you were talking about, Tom.
Yeah, maple's one of those that'll burn.
Yeah, it will. It's a maple burl. And so I had to take it slow and fool with it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun. It's something totally different.
Yeah.
Roger, I'm looking at the question that Yvonne asked about manzanita. I know she lives in Lompoc, California, and has manzanita on her property, so I'm kind of reading between the lines. But has anyone carved manzanita?
I have gotten small pieces of manzanita, and I've done a little bit of carving on it. It's what I've used it for is I've carved really small hummingbirds, and I'll use a piece of manzanita because it's bright red, and I'll just clean it up. I won't do all that much carving on it, and just kind of smooth out the top and make a little flower. but use the lobes of the, I mean, it's multi-lobed, and I'll just use the lobes as the petals and not change the shape of them. It's pretty hard wood. And it's another one that'll burn if you get going too fast. It is pretty wood. But it tends to not be real big, or at least what I've gotten a hold of.
Well, we had the opportunity this time, unfortunately, of getting some wood that I have never ever worked on, and that's rhododendron. We got a whole bunch of rhododendron around here that came down because of ice. You don't have that problem down in LA.
No, I'm in Paso Robles, and we don't get snow, and it freezes, but we don't get snow.
Tom, who did you work for in Oregon when you worked here? Paula, where did you
I work for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife at the research lab in Corvallis.
Oh, okay.
31 years.
I got a couple of degrees from Oregon State.
I'm gonna unspotlight everybody and see if we can let people raise their hands. But I think, Terry, I'm gonna call on you if I could. Roger might not have seen your comment about power chisels. Someone, I think Martin, asked about power chisels. And then Terry, you had experience with your own. Let me go see if I can find you.
I'm
Are you
here.
willing?
I'm always willing to talk, Larry.
There you are. Okay. People move around. I got two screens full. So Terry, I'm going to spotlight you. Could you just
Okay.
elaborate a little bit on your comment that you would put in the chat about your
Sure.
attachments?
Yeah, I really have I'd had a Fordham flex shaft kind of tool for quite a while, and I used a lot of rotary stuff, but I like to hand carve with chisels and gouges, and but my hands too, and especially as I get older, we do that. We don't get younger; we get older, unfortunately. My hands will get sore and tired a lot quicker.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I found an attachment that changed direction from rotary to reciprocating. That also is a blade holder, and but it had a limited number of blades, and they were kind of like the ones that Roger showed, which aren't really real great. Those blades, hard to sharpen, and pretty limited. So I found an attachment, another adapter for that other attachment that would accept flex cut shafts, blades. And so I bought a bunch of flex cut blades and use that when I do things on, well, I used to carve a lot of walking sticks, faces and things on walking sticks, and sold them at trade shows. So with that attachment and those blades, I could turn out a face at least twice as fast, if not 3 times as fast, and I could work a lot longer. So I did that. And then I started doing chainsaw carving, and I found that adding detail to these big carvings was a super pain. If you just trying to get a nice looking nose that's 2 feet long is a big job. So that helped with that also. And then I remembered from years before when I was still doing real handyman work around the house that I'd done a lot of tiling. And to tile the floor, I had to take up the old tile, linoleum tile, and I had an electric reciprocating chisel made by Skill, I think. Well, that was collecting dust out in the garage, but somehow I found another attachment that I could use with that would accept those same flex cut blades. So now I had a thing that I could hold in 2 hands when I was doing a big carving, because I was carving a log and I was pretty well fixed in one position. I could use 2 hands and carve with that electric chisel. So I have a nice semi-portable electric chisel that I use also that can really eat up some wood. I can take a bunch of wood off a piece with that. So that's my experience with, some of my experience with power carving.
Super. Thank you, Terry. For those that don't know Terry, he's also an instructor for us. He's now teaching wood spirits classes for us, and he will teach other things. He's also on our board of directors and is the secretary of the board and also the webmaster or co-webmaster with Roger. The two of them are partners in crime and built a site for us and keep it going. Roger, you looking at the chat? See if there's questions there. Yvonne, do you have any further questions about the Manzanita?
Well, I have a Dremel and I've got some of the, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Kazal. I bought the,
Petzl?
Cutzel?
yeah, I just got the round one and then I have a little pointed one and a couple of others. And I don't know if you can see my little cowboy here. I just use it just to do my cowboy hats. You know, I got a broken arm, so I can't to go in there. But I've got Manzanita all over the place up here. And I mean, what he said about the little bird sounded great, but can you do that with just a Dremel, or would you need something like, the bigger ones? The bigger machines instead of the Dremel.
Yeah, I used the microcarver when I work on the Manzanita.
That's what you call it, micro carver. And
Yeah,
I do have
high
one more
speed.
question. Yeah. And I do have one more question. I just picked up in Santa Maria the other day, one of those little miniature, it's like a little miniature chainsaw, but the blade's like 4 inches. Has anybody ever tried carving with that? It's just supposed to be like to cut branches and stuff. But since my arm's broke, I can't do anything. It's like, oh boy, am I going to have fun when, it's well.
Actually, on the angle grinder on the video, there was two chainsaw power attachments, about 3 or 4 inches, about 4 inches in diameter, and those work pretty good. In I think they would probably do the same thing as that tool you're talking about.
I'd be very, very, very careful with it.
Yeah, as I
I
say,
almost cut a guy's leg off one time with the chain.
Oh, wow.
yeah, when
Yeah.
you hit that wood, it will jump on you. So
Bet.
you got to have a good stance, just like you're going
Good
to try.
strong grip.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
well, what I got it for is when I go horseback riding and I'm on top of my mule, it's just when the branches are too low, it's just to cut it off on the mule. So, and I thought that doesn't sound real safe. I'm going to have to work something else out there.
You don't need to cut your neck off.
No.
Well, let me Ed Ferguson asked a question, which I'm going to put this in the category of a ringer question, which is, how long did you stick with hand tools before you switched to power tools? And I think the ringer question is it an either or a both and kind of a thing? Do you think do you guys see it as for Tom,
I've basically sold all of my hand tools. I had a whole big package of Swiss-made carving chisels, and I've sold them all. I think I have one left that I use to get into tight places in some of my carvings. But I started carving in 2005, and I probably finished I finished Carousel Animal in 2011, but I still had my wife's carousel horse here to finish. So I probably finished that a couple of years later. So probably 2013. I probably carved for 7, 8 years with hand tools, but I switched over to power before I finished her horse. So I had to come back and finish the horse after I started carving. That's why the horse took so long. The horse took 9 years, I think, but it was because I was carving all these other things so
Al, you're a both and. You do more hand carving than power. Is that correct?
I do more, yes, I do more hand carving. I have more control. For me, you know, the power is dusty and a little noisier. But it really has its place. You can do things with power that you just can't do with the tools. No matter how sharp I try to get my tools, for instance, that bark carving, the cottonwood bark likes to crumble. So when I try to put like a detail of a ladder in, I had to use power. I just couldn't do it with my knives. And I get out my little master carver micro tool a lot to just repair things or fix things, or I'm getting into under a tight spot that I can't really sand well, so I'll use a little pointed you know, a diamond bit like this to get in there and sand. So for me, it is, they both have their place. I guess I don't carve enough to really, my hands are arthritic, but strangely enough, it seems when I carve with them, they feel better so far with the hand tools.
What's the average age of the gentleman here today? Well, and people, not just the gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen.
31.
Oh, boy. You're a liar. I know better than that.
I'm in my 70s.
You guys
Yeah,
might have,
70s.
I'm new to the world of power carving. I ended up buying a Fordham at an estate sale, and I didn't use it for a couple of years, and I finally gave it away, or I think I gave it to the guild, and they sold it at another estate sale. Then I realized I needed one, so I bought a second one at an estate sale. And I made a rookie mistake, you know, just sort of mea culpa. I was carving something with my hand, and I had a glove in my hand, but it was not a leather glove. It was a cloth glove. It had a Kevlar in it, and that little coarse bit snagged, and it thankfully didn't rip my finger off. Unfortunately, the fuse blew on the Fordham and screwed up the shaft. So you know, it's kind of humbling to admit that, but life happens. And when I tell people that story, they say, "Well, it happened to me. It happened to me. How many shafts have you replaced on your Fordham?" Kind of a thing.
Happened to me.
Yeah, so it goes on. And, you know, these things are, that's kind of one of the reasons is the dust and the masks and the leather protection things. It's really easy for newcomers to do that, to get involved. But I found there's a power carving manual, that book that Woodcarvers Illustrated put out, sort of the best of their power carving manuals. I found that to be a particularly helpful book for me. Al had his floors refinished, so his master carver unit was not able to be shown today, but he did a show and tell for us for about 20 minutes, and it's in the book, and I ended up buying that, and I'm very happy with that. It's sort of a value version of the thing, but it really looks like it does everything the high price spreads do. And I just have had it for a couple of weeks, so I'm anxious to get some more experience with that. Now that I have a leather glove and a leather Harbor Freight $12 leather apron, and an attachment for my central vac, so I can get the dust moved out. But we're also, I asked Roger this question when we got started, is, you know, what's next, right? And some of us have Dremel, some of us don't. Some of us have the Dremel, you know, a few bits for various household repair things. But it's that kind of a question. Is it going to be a bad experience or a good experience? Tom and Al and I are in this weekly California club that we talk with, and a guy from spent half his time there and half the time in Alaska was talking about his own journey on power carving, and he said he hated it. He took a class at the famous Rendezvous in California. He just was not getting anywhere until the instructor came over and pointed out that there was a reverse switch on his motor. And as a left-hander, that switch turned out to be, it really made now he's an advocate. But if you're left-handed, you need to have the rotation go the different direction. So really simple things, like you end up at an estate sale and you're going to buy something, and it's got the right price, but it doesn't have a reverse switch. You might say, well, How do I think about that? So these little tidbits might help us become better consumers, but it's also how do we get some experience? One day we will be able to join physically, for those of us that are in the Portland area, we can get a shop together and we can put these tools on the benches and people can try them out. You might be able to do that at some of the stores. I don't know for sure. I have not tried it. And I would say from the Oregon Carvers Guild perspective, a part of our mission statement is to be mentors to others. You know, Roger's got all this stuff. I bet if you called him up and he was safe and you're whatever, you probably at some point could say, can I try that out? Mark Klein in the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers has an Arbor Tech, and he offered to just loan his whole kit to me one time. And one of these days I'll take him up on that. So, you know, we have the ability to try this stuff out before we do it. But in the end, it's kind of the why use power carving. One is health. As we age, joints give out. The best carver in Oregon I've ever met is a guy named Dennis Mims, who passed away a couple of years ago. Tony Rizzuto, who's here, you can see him. Tony is the immediate past president of the Western Woodcarvers. Introduced me indirectly to Dennis. I got a chance to meet him, but he had to retire. He retired at age 80, and he had to switch to power carving because the joints were giving out, and eventually he had to give it all up because he had. So age is one factor. The other is just efficiency. Right? We can get a lot more stuff done. You know, are we willing to give up our bandsaw for roughing out some stuff, or are we going to be purists and do everything by hand?
No.
No, right. So we make these choices. So that's why I kind of pose the question of it's a both and world, that there's probably roles for both hand and power tools as we go through life. And sometimes we don't need much power. We just need to go borrow something from somebody and get the rough out done, bandsawed out or whatever, and then, you know, get on with doing the creative work.
There's also something else, Larry, and that is, I don't know how to do this. Do you? And if you do, maybe I can get it from you. And that's the benefit of these kind of get-togethers.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
Yeah,
point.
none of us know everything, and the more shared knowledge we can take advantage of, the better for all of us.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I had a follow-on question to the ringer question about hand versus power carving, if the panel has time for it. And that is the skill sets involved. Are they different, or is there a lot of carryover? I'm just dipping my toes into hand carving right now, but I was interested in what the power carving arena looked like.
I think there's some overlap, but when I take a look at projects I've done with hand and projects I've done with power tools, they're really completely different. I think there's a question in chat, you know, what do you start with? And the main advantage of a power tool is hogging wood out really, really quickly. So like if you're doing a relief carving, getting that relief wood out of the way is the grunt work, like I said, and then you can get into the fine work of the carving. So I think Al said it best, every tool has its place. And, you know, I think it's up to us to educate everyone as when a certain tool is best to be used. But I think a combination of starting with power tools to hog the wood out, and then if you need to do finer work, that's where the hand tools come in. As far as skills, first, you don't need much sharpening skills to use power tools, but you need a lot of sharpening skills to use hand tools, that's for sure. So I don't know that there's a lot of physical overlap in skills there, but to me, carving, most difficult part of carving is figuring out what you want to do and getting the shape right. And that's sort of a skill by itself. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you.
But I'm in the middle of doing two elephants that are, I don't know, 9 or 10 inches long. And I just got tired of spending all my time trying to get those odd pieces of big hunks of wood off those elephants. So I went to Power Tools and used those power chisels to get big hunks of the elephant off. And then when I got it down to a size that I felt a little more comfortable with, I went back to hand carving again. And in that case, the transition was really easy because the way you use one of those power chisels is very much like the way you'd use
Yeah.
a long handled chisel with 2 hands. But on the other hand, if I had decided to do burrs and use a rotary power tool, that's a little different. For me, a lot different. I mean, you really have to be careful about where it goes into the wood and how deep you go. And I don't know. I've used rotary tools again to get off big hunks of wood quickly, but they skitter around on me. I guess I'm just not confident. I'm not very confident with them, very comfortable. So I tend to overcompensate, use more force, and dig in and ruin things. I'm not a very good rotary tool power user, to tell you the truth. I guess that's why I do love my chisels, though, my power chisels. I'll use those all day long. Except, I don't know, this is kind of a cross between a rotary tool and a reciprocating tool, and that's a chainsaw. I found that a chainsaw works a lot like a really big knife, a serrated knife. So, I don't feel too uncomfortable using a chainsaw.
Well,
It's a different power tool.
I'm going to just spotlight myself. This is this thing called a Power Carving Manual by Wood Carving Illustrated that I found, that I mentioned earlier. This is kind of my little self-help book. It's got 22 projects in it. There's a couple there that intrigue me, and is going to be what I'm going to be working on to try to train myself. If anybody wants to play along, let me know.
Let me ask you a question, Larry.
Yes, Jim.
Are you going to get this group together again in the future?
Well, the group gets together once a month, Jim. We just do different things. So this is the monthly program of the Oregon Carvers Guild. So obviously the programs vary. We have no plan to do anything on power carving again, but I can't believe that there's not more interest at some dimension of it. And I just don't know what. So, send in some suggestions on email, and we'll kind of try to factor those in as we do future programs or classes. In general, I think our philosophy is to do different programs every month on different topics to cast a pretty wide net. And then to have the smaller groups that want to dive deeper to do focus sessions offline to go in depth. And, those may have legs and turn into classes or workshops or community projects or those kind of things. But we're kind of feeling our way around these topics.
I think that is very important. I think all of us found out some things today, one of which Roger's got too much equipment. And, but in all seriousness, none of us have all the answers. None of us. We may think we do at times, but we don't. And it's important to realize that and to learn from each other.
Yeah. I agree. The original Western Woodcarvers Association struggled with what they were all about, and looking back through their history, they coined the phrase, which became their mantra, which got carved into their logo, called Share the Knowledge. Share the knowledge. And it's that spirit of being open and not private that becomes really, really key. The older I get, the dumber I realize I am. And it's just a lot to learn. And it just goes on.
My
Which makes
father
sense.
died when he was 61, and he was a dry cleaner. But he grew up with a Finnish carpenter, and he was an absolute artist with hand tools. But he never had an opportunity to do something like we do here. And I think it was very, very, very unfortunate.
Yeah. I want to the time is about up. People are dropping off and we're going to run out of time. But does anybody want to share anything that haven't talked or have a question or observation or recommendation? Anything on?
I got one thing that I want to say. I had some very, very expensive experiences with a chainsaw. I had northeast of a little nowhere in the far north. I was measuring signs and properties and on and on and on. We had a mining spot out there. And I had 5 kids working for me. And I was forever yelling at them to stay the hell away from me. Well, one time, one of the kids was trying to brown nose. I stopped cutting what I was cutting. I had cut the tree a little bit too short. I mean, I had to cut it down another foot and a half. And one of these kids came around behind me after I was cutting that piece of wood through, and he was going to pick it up straight up. You cannot do that. That thing was about 18 inches in diameter. And it kicked back in his leg, and I damn near cut his leg off. I forever, ever, I get around a chainsaw, and I have one. I've had a couple of them. I make damn certain that, first of all, I know where everybody is and what I'm going to do with that and what's going on. So my comment is, those things will jump on you, and they'll jump and you cannot control them. There's no way in the world you can control them. So if you're fooling around with a chainsaw, know what you're doing and learn how to handle it. That's my only comment tonight.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. That's good advice. I kind of translate that. Anything with a motor, I put in that same category. And for hand carvers, one of our older members was a shop teacher in a high school, and he always would ask the kids. He said, "What's the most dangerous tool in the high school wood shop?"
The kid.
Well, that's one of them, yeah. But his answer was a chisel. That's the one that causes the most accidents because it rolls off the table. Everybody sticks their hand under it and tries to catch it. He said, "I can't tell you how many times I've had to extract the chisel out of the palm of a kid."
God.
Anyway, that was his answer. For me, it was a jointer. It took me years to get over my fear of jointers. So we all have our fears.
Did Jim see my note about woodcarversupply.com in Florida for those mandrels, for the bull-nosed mandrel and the caps that go on it? I have the page right here, Jim.
Where did you get that?
Woodcarver Supply.
Supply.com.
Thank you.
That's exactly what you're looking for. I use them all the time. They're wonderful.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Does anybody else have comments, questions? I would like to thank Roger for an incredible amount of work to put those videos together. I mean, he makes it look so easy, but I just can't imagine how many hours and hours it took to shoot and edit down all that video and get it to the point. I do know he did two versions of that, and I suspect, anyway, he's been doing this. I think it's the role model for us and for me is really tremendous. So thank you to Roger, and thank you to our panelists, to Tom and Elle and Jim, for being willing to share, and thank you all for coming and sticking with the program. I hope you'll stick with us. Thank you for.
I'd like to talk to Roger if I might, personally. Can I do that?
It cost you a nickel.
That's fine.
I'm here.
I already owe you money.
Okay.
How you doing
Wanna-
physically, Roger?
I'm doing good.
How
Doing good.
bad did you get hit on your head?
I didn't have a head injury. I just had a slight stroke, and I'm recovering from that with a lot of PT. So I'm doing
Yeah.
good.
I know all about that.
Okay.
I can talk to you later, Jim.
Very good. I'll give you a call.
Okay. And thanks everyone again for attending. Like Larry said, it's fun to do these, but it's a lot more fun when you got lots of people that are interested. So,
Yeah, thank you, Roger.
so till next time, guys.
Okay. I'll pull the plug. I'll stop the recording, and it'll be available. If you have any questions for Roger that can't find his address, let me know. Otherwise,
Thanks,
or I can
guys.
forward questions.
Roger,